So here we go again with another lockdown special, hoping to keep us together while we're apart. This is the third part of our story of the Nottinghamshire Awards of the Victoria Cross. And as we know, the Victoria Cross is the highest and most prestigious award of the British Honours System. It was inaugurated in January 1856 by Queen Victoria to honour acts of valour. It has been awarded for valour in the presence of the enemy to members of the British Armed Services. We have now reached the last two Victoria Cross awards made to Nottinghamshire people. The only Nottinghamshire Victoria Cross recipient in World War II is Rear Admiral Robert St Vincent Sherbrooke, and the only Nottinghamshire Victoria Cross recipient who was born in Newark is Lieutenant Colonel William Thomas Marshall, and it's their stories that we will be telling today. Rear Admiral Robert St Vincent Sherbrooke is a man whose actions lead directly to the Allies winning an entire battle. Not just an action. As a result of winning the battle, the Allies win an entire campaign, not just a battle. But the Allies don't know this until later. This is an important story, so we're going to take some time. Robert St Vincent Sherbrooke was born in Oxton, Nottinghamshire, on the 8th of January 1901, the son of Henry Graham Sherbrooke, DSO of the Royal Navy, and Flora Maud Sherbrooke, née Franklin. He was educated at the Royal Naval Colleges of Osborne on the Isle of Wight and Dartmouth in Devon, and he joined the British Royal Navy in 1917 during World War I as a midshipman on the battleship HMS Canada. In April 1921 he was promoted to the rank of lieutenant, and by December 1935 he had achieved the rank of commander and was serving on the fleet aircraft carrier HMS Courageous. In June 1942, during World War II, he was promoted to the rank of captain and given the command of HMS Onslow. 6 months later, he was commanding a destroyer group escorting convoys on the Arctic route, according to the new tactical plan of more frequent, smaller convoys sailing under cover of winter darkness. JW51A departed from Loch Ewe on the 18th of December 1942. JW51B consisted of another 15 merchant ships departed from Loch Ewe on the 22nd of December 1942. Both convoys were intended to make the return trip as soon as their cargoes were offloaded. Convoy J51B sailed with a close escort provided by the minesweeper HMS Bramble, 2 Flower-class corvettes HMS Rhododendron and HMS Hyderabad, 2 armed trawlers, Northern Gem and Vrizelda, and 15 merchantmen, sailing under the flags of Britain, America, or flags of convenience. In addition to the close escort, convoy JW51B left Loch Ewe with 4 temporary escort destroyers: HMS Blakely, HMS Childingfold, HMS Ledbury, and HMS Bulldog. But north of the Hebrides, they picked up their support escort of the 6 Home Fleet destroyers led by Captain Sherbrooke in HMS Onslow. The others and the convoy made course for the Kola Peninsula. HMS Onslow, HMS Ashantis, HMS Obedient, HMS Obdurate, HMS Orwell, and HMS Oribe. Long-range cover for both convoy JW51A and JW51B were the cruisers HMS Sheffield with 12 6-inch guns and HMS Jamaica with the same armament. These cruisers had with them 2 escort destroyers, HMS Matchless and HMS Opportune. The Germans, of course, had a counter-proposal. They had had great success earlier in 1942 against convoy PQ-17. This had been a disastrous convoy for the Allies, with 24 merchant ships being sunk out of a convoy of 35 merchant ships. But that had been in the summer, when the sun never set and the Luftwaffe could bomb and the U-boat force could torpedo to their heart's content. For some reason that's never been clear, convoy PQ-17 was ordered to scatter, which also meant the defensive plan and the defensive assets were useless. It's now winter, and the sun hardly rises to break night time. The Luftwaffe could not attack in force, and the U-boats would have difficulty finding their targets. But Hitler still has a powerful surface fleet, and 2 heavy cruisers were waiting in the Alta Fjord to foray out against Russian-bound convoys. The heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper and the heavy cruiser Lutzow, which used to be known as the Deutschland and was classed as a pocket battleship, are ready to attack northbound convoys. They also have 6 destroyers in attendance. The German fleet is commanded by Admiral Oskar Kummetz, who is aware of convoy JW51B and the composition of its close escort, because the U-boat U-345 had been observing and reporting on the convoy for several days. He has devised Unternehmen Regenbogen, Operation Rainbow, to attack the Russian-bound convoys. However, Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa, took shipping away from the Russian convoys, and JW51A and 51B are the first convoys available for the Regenbogen attack. JW51A takes the Germans by surprise and reaches Murmansk without any losses. JW51B is nicely on time. Kummetz has a plan to split his fleet into 2 equal forces, with 1 heavy cruiser and 3 destroyers in each. He will take Hipper to the north of the convoy and drive it south, where Lutzow will trap it and the 2 capital ships will destroy it, while the destroyers harass and pursue. He will also draw the escort to Hipper and destroy them. The only fly in the ointment is that Hitler has instructed Kummetz to destroy the convoy, but not to risk his ships. However, he should be comfortably out of range of the escort destroyers, and sink them before they can get into range. So the opposing forces are lined up, and with the two heavy cruisers, they are in favour of the Germans. As convoy JW51B had steered towards the North Cape of Norway, a storm had driven in from the north, and this meant that the convoy of JW51B had reformed and passed the storm. It was a little further south and east than had been planned. Kummetz comes out in the Hipper to track and pass the convoy to the north. The Lutzow runs parallel to the convoy and south of it, ready to spring the trap. In the meantime, Sheffield and Jamaica are steering generally westward to take up cover positions after seeing convoy JW51A into Murmansk. At 8:20 on the 31st of December, HMS Obdurant, stationed south of the convoy, spotted 3 German destroyers to the west. At more or less the same time, HMS Onslow spotted the Admiral Hipper, also to the rear of the convoy, and steering to intercept with HMS Orwell, Obedient and Obdurate in company, Onslow set off. Sherbrooke could not reach the enemy with his guns, and he realizes that his best weapon against heavy surface ships is his torpedoes, but they are limited and cannot be reloaded, so he needs to keep them. So he feints a torpedo attack and forces the Hipper to turn away. At the same time, he hopes the distant escort cruisers HMS Sheffield and HMS Jamaica and their 2 escort destroyers commanded by Admiral Sir Robert Lindsay Burnett will join the action. 3 separate times Sherbrooke dashes towards torpedo range against the Hipper. Kummetz has been ordered, if possible, not to risk his ship. Twice the Hipper turns away, and her captain following the Admiral's instructions. But on the 3rd attempt, the feint attack on Hipper gets the range with her 8-inch guns. To see how this works out, let's follow the Obdurant and German destroyers in their track. Firstly, Obdurant picks up the Germans and runs parallel with them. Realizing what they are, she then turns to the east and moves away at full speed. The Germans continue to move slowly because they suspect they may be driving into a trap, but the Obdurant is simply getting back into position to cover convoy JW51B from the north. Meantime, Sherbrooke's flotilla attack is moving north to meet with the Hipper. Hipper fires at her on several occasions but never hits, and Sherbrooke continues to dash in and out, feigning torpedo attacks. But then unfortunately the Hipper gets her range and Sherbrooke is heavily hit. HMS Acantes is sunk, and HMS Onslow is badly damaged from Hipper's guns. And as Hipper moves south, she also spots HMS Bramble, and for good measure sinks her. So with Hipper moving south and Lutzow coming up on its track, The convoy is in danger, and it looks as if a little later than planned, the rainbow trap has sprung. The convoy has made some progress, however, and is rapidly moving out of range. Hipper's salvo smash into HMS Hounslow, killing 17 of her crew and destroying her bridge and gunnery controllers. Captain Sherbrooke is seriously wounded by a massive shell splinter in the face that has temporarily blinded him. Nevertheless, he continues to direct the ships under his command, and even when he passes command to the captain of HMS Obedient as the next senior officer, he insists on receiving all the reports of the action until the convoy had sailed out of range. He had successfully delayed the Hipper in a running fight and may have given the convoy time to reach safety. It is dark, so it's difficult to see anything at range, and radar isn't reliable at these latitudes because of freezing on the antennae. All his ships can do is to continue to harass the enemy. Sherbrooke, the man, is now out of the fight. Suddenly, Admiral Hipper is hit by shellfire. Initially, Kummetz thinks Sherbrooke's destroyers have somehow got into range. He manoeuvres aggressively, but is hit again by shellfire. Hearing the gunfire, Sheffield and Jamaica have steamed quickly down from the north and caught Kummetz by surprise. Sheffield and Jamaica approached unseen and opened fire on the Admiral Hipper at 11:35. Enough 6-inch shells have hit the Hipper to damage 2 of her boiler rooms and damage her fire control and reduce her speed to 28 knots. Her captain initially thought that the fire of the 2 cruisers was coming from another destroyer from Sherbrooke's original escort flotilla. Soon Kummetz realizes the mistake and remembers Hitler's orders. Do not risk your ship. He orders Admiral Hipper to retreat to the west, away from the convoy. He makes his way back to his home port, leaving the destroyers to cover his retreat, and drops anchor in Elterfjord almost before the battle is finished. Sherbrooke's tactics throughout the fight had been that of threatening torpedo runs to unnerve the enemy and hold him at bay. This is what he was doing in HMS Onslow, but he had also impressed the same tactic on his subordinate captains. Even when Sherbrooke gave up his command, the tactic was continued. Every time an enemy ship settled to pursue the convoy, a destroyer would make a dash, without actually firing its torpedoes. The point being that the enemy doesn't know whether the torpedoes are in the water or not, and must respond. The standard response to a torpedo attack was to comb the tracks. Broadside, a ship represents a very large target to a torpedo, but turning into the tracks reduces the target size. Combing the tracks. Problem is that turning in also reduces the range, so there can still be a very big bang. Kummetz would have turned away every time Hitler was threatening. Turning away is better, but it puts your ship out of position. A quote from Hitler's log: "Visibility very poor. Everything seems hazy. Cannot make out whether I am dealing with friend or foe. A total of 10 ships now in sight, some of which look like destroyers. It cannot be said for certain whether our shadowing destroyers are not among them. At 0944, a destroyer approached from the southeast and then put her helm hard over. She had fired her torpedoes." The destroyer referred to is HMS Onslow. HMS Onslow does not release her torpedoes. HMS Onslow does not release a single torpedo throughout the battle. But Kummetz thought she had. Thanks to Sherbrooke's initial action in pinning the German force out of the reach of the convoy, the odds are now much closer to even, and the Germans have not yet detected the British cruisers. The gunfire from the action so far had drawn the attention of Admiral Burnett with Force R and his 2 6-inch class cruisers, HMS Sheffield and HMS Jamaica. But another case of mistaken identity. The Friedrich Eckhold and the Richard Beetson don't know that the Admiral Hipper has left, so they mistook Sheffield for the Admiral Hipper. After attempting to form up with the British ships, they were engaged by the Sheffield and the Friedrich Eckhold, breaking in two and sinking with all hands. So, by his actions, Rear Admiral Robert St. Vincent Sherbrooke, VC CB DSO DL, held off the German ships attacking convoy JW51B, and against an entirely superior force, delayed the German attack until an equalizing force could arrive and neutralize the threat. In spite of serious wounds, he continued to control his ship and take an active interest in the progress of the battle. It is remembered as the Battle of the Barents Seas. His conduct was pivotal in Hitler's order to end the use of the surface fleet of the Kriegsmarine at the beginning of 1943. The battle against Germany's surface raiders was won. A worthy VC. Convoy JW51B sailed into Murmansk with one ship slightly damaged by gunfire. The Royal Navy lost the destroyer HMS Ashantis and the minesweeper HMS Bramble. They lost these ships to Hipper's gunfire. Hipper's gunfire also badly damaged HMS Onslow, with a total loss of 250 souls. On the German side, they had lost the destroyer Friedrich Eckhold with all hands, and had suffered damage to the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper. Their losses totaled 330 souls. More importantly, Hitler completely lost confidence in his surface ships. He sacked Admiral Raeder and put Admiral Dönitz in command of naval operations. In other words, he put his faith in submarines. 5 capital ships still existed in the Kriegsmarine, but Hitler had no further interest in what happened to them. Sherbrooke's Victoria Cross, rewarded for the action. Victoria Crosses are always awarded for actions. This action won the battle. The battle won the campaign. The campaign helped win the war. And finally, the last Nottinghamshire VC we will remember in our programme is, like the first, a true son of Newark. Most of us have some image in our minds of the death of General Gordon, and although Gordon should be most remembered as Chinese Gordon for his work in that country, we probably remember him best as General Gordon of Khartoum. It was here that he died. Gordon's death came as an event in the Mahdist War, which started when a self-proclaimed Mahdi of Islam inspired rebellion against the Khedivate of Egypt and ended with the Battle of Omdurman. To the British, it was the Sudan campaign. And it is in the Sudan campaign that Lieutenant Colonel William Thomas Marshall, who was born in Newark on the 5th of December 1854, the son of John Richard Marshall, began his illustrious military career. This final piece of the programme is his story. William Thomas Marshall was educated privately, so little is known of his early life, until he joined the 19th Hussars, the Queen Alexander's own, on the 20th of July 1873, aged 17. At the time, the colonel of the regiment was John York, who had fought with the Heavy Brigade at the Battle of Balaclava and had lost a leg. Marshall first saw action with the regiment during the Anglo-Egyptian War of 1882 to 1884, when he was present at the Battle of Tel el-Kebib, which was fought near Kasassin in defence of the Suez Canal, and where he gained his first military awards. The Battle of Tel el-Kebib was fought between the Egyptian rebel army, led by Ahmed Urabi, and the British military near Tel el-Kebib. After discontented Egyptian officers under Urabi rebelled in 1882, the United Kingdom reacted to protect its interests in the country, and in particular the Suez Canal. Once positions had been established, the infantry advanced steadily in echelon to engage the enemy's line. And when the last units of infantry engaged with the rebels, the 1st Life Guards cavalry made a sweeping attack around the Egyptian left flank. The Egyptian resistance gave way all along the line. And units pushed through, forcing the Egyptians off the field. The Hussars did not engage. But Marshall was awarded the Egypt Campaign Medal with the Tel el-Kebib clasp and the Khedive's Star. You can see these medals in the photograph alongside his Victoria Cross, so he was obviously proud to wear them. The Khedive's Star was a campaign medal established by Khedive Tewfik Pasha to reward those who had participated in the military campaigns in Egypt and the Sudan between 1882 and 1891. He then served in the Sudan campaign of 1884, being present at the engagements at El Teb and Tamai. He was first mentioned in dispatches and also received 2 clasps to the Sudan Campaign Medal for El Teb and Tamai. The Battle of El Teb was the first battle of the British Army's involvement in the Sudan. It was fought on the 29th of February 1884. The British Infantry Brigade marched in column whilst the cavalry covered the left flank. And they formed a line just over the hill, some 2.5 miles in front of the hamlet of El Teb, with Egyptian forces occupying high land and the valley beyond. The way the British formed up suggested a battle with volley fire against the enemy, but then British infantry, fighting an unsophisticated opponent, had converted the defensive infantry square into an offensive formation resembling the Roman testudo, a square that was capable of movement. They moved up onto the high ground and pushed the Egyptians back. The Egyptians attempted to recover their position, but and they fell into firing lines that seemed to surround the square. They opened fire with their muskets and any other firearms they happened to have, and the square lay the hill. The cavalry, including the 19th Hussars, saw an opportunity to drive a charge into the rear of the Egyptian line. This they did, and it allowed the square to advance into El Teb and take over the village. But the tribesmen were better able to fight as a disordered unit than the cavalry, so although the charge allowed the infantry to assert control in the centre, the cavalry was struggling. It was now that Quartermaster Sergeant Marshall came into his own. And the commanding officer of 19 Hussars, Lieutenant Colonel Barrow, was knocked down and trapped beneath his horse. At this point, Quartermaster Sergeant Marshall rode to his aid. He grabbed his hand and dragged him onto his horse, and rode through the enemy soldiers and back to the regiment, saving Colonel Barrow from certain death. On the 21st of May, 1884, he was gazetted in London to receive the Victoria Cross for his action on the 29th of February, 1884, at the Battle of El Teb. Marshall was invested with the Victoria Cross on the 3rd of July, 1884, at Windsor Castle, receiving it from Queen Victoria. He was then commissioned as a quartermaster on the 20th of February 1885. He later served in the Second Boer War in 1899 to 1900 and took part in the operations in Natal, including the actions at Lombard's Kop, the defensive Ladysmith, and Landsknecht. He married on the 24th of October 1900 in Ipswich to Louisa Wiseman, third daughter of Captain Wiseman of the Indian Army. William was camp quartermaster at Aldershot in 1905 and retired from service in 1907. He was mentioned in dispatches during the Great War, again for his services as acting depot quartermaster, and promoted to lieutenant colonel in 1919 in recognition of his war work. Marshall died on the 11th of September 1920, aged 65, at Kirkcaldy, Fife in Scotland. He was buried at Kirkcaldy Cemetery. His medals are held by the 15th 19th Royal Hussars Museum at Newcastle-on-Tyne. So, the last of the 21 of Nottinghamshire's VCs and the end of Part 3. Robert St. Vincent Sherbrooke and William Thomas Marshall. So there we have it. 21 Nottinghamshire Victoria Crosses. And if you have been listening since Gonville Bromhead in Part 1, you now know the story of all the Nottinghamshire Victoria Crosses. Together while we're apart, another lockdown special is on the way. There will be more programs in the near future. However, in future, I'm going off-piste. The first 3 programs have reflected the talks we have missed with the group. But we don't know when we will be meeting again, and when we do, we will want to get back our missing speakers. So my future programs will be about topics of history that interest me and that I hope will interest you. The next one has been requested following the RAF Syerston program. So keep a lookout for a brief history of RAF Bomber Command. Stay safe and watch this space. Thank you and goodbye.